All right, lean in, because the truth at the range isn't always what the ads tell you. Walk up to the gun counter today, scroll through the endless feeds online, and it's the same message. If it isn't the newest, the flashiest, the loudest, it doesn't matter. But let me tell you, the real tests aren't happening at 100 yards on paper. Step past that, push out beyond 200 yards where the wind has a voice, where your heart, your breathing, and your control over recoil are the only things between a hit and a miss. That's where the line is drawn. That's where the seasoned marksmen separate themselves from the weekend plinkers. Out there, newer doesn't automatically equal better. It never did. What counts is performance. Period. And that applies just as much to your cartridges as it does to your trigger discipline. Here's the hard part most shooters forget. Some of the cartridges that solved these challenges decades ago got left behind, buried under the hype of the latest trend. They weren't flashy. They didn't get Instagram posts. But they worked. And today, we're dragging them back into the spotlight. These are the cartridges that have consistently performed in the field where it counts. Trajectory, precision, terminal punch, and shooter confidence. These are the rounds that have dropped moose in the Scandinavian wilderness, hammered coyotes across wide-open ranches, and put whitetails down cleanly, quietly, without ever needing a flashy headline. Some whisper through the air with barely a recoil jolt, grouping like precision match ammo. Others fly past 3,000 feet per second and still keep those rounds tight on paper. Every single one? They perform better than most shooters give them credit for. Let's start with number 7, the 2i57 Roberts. Take the classic 757mm case. Trim it down for the 4-inch projectiles. Keep the pressures modest. What you get is a smooth shooting cartridge that hides its power behind an almost whisper-quiet report. A 117-grain Sierra Pro Hunter at 3,000 feet per second still carries over 2,000 feet per second at 400 yards when hand-loaded and tuned-in rifles like the Kimber Hunter or a Winchester Model 70 featherweight. Sub-minute of angle groups? Not uncommon. Recoil? Around 9 foot-pounds from a 7-pound rifle. Even a beginner can stay in the glass, track their hits, and actually see the impact unfold. But don't let that soft demeanor fool you. This cartridge handles antelope, axis deer, and even cow elk with surgical precision, as long as the bullet lands where it's meant to. Part of the magic lies in the brass design. Head spacing off the shoulder keeps bullet jump consistent, and the concentricity of the brass is exceptional. Hunters love it on coyote drives. That 100-grain partition load? It punches cleanly right behind the shoulder, without a racket that sends the next coyote into hiding. Factory loads can vary depending on what's on the shelf, but hand loaders, they worship the efficiency. Forming the cases is straightforward, powder burn is clean, and the 257 Roberts quietly outperforms many of today's trendy 6.5mm options. Mild recoil, field-tested performance, dependable accuracy. It's a cartridge that sneaks into the 100-yard cloverleaf club without ever bragging. Then comes number 6, the 280 Remington. Born in 1957, Remington took the 30-06 case, necked it down to 7mm, shifted the shoulder slightly forward, and inadvertently produced one of the most balanced hunting cartridges in existence. Fire a 140-grain AccuBond at 3,000 feet per second, and it flies flatter than a 270 Winchester, while resisting wind drift better than heavier rounds. Step up to a 160-grain partition at 2,900 feet per second, and you see more penetration than a 30-06 of similar weight thanks to that superior sectional density. Rifles like the Remington Model 700 Mountain Rifle or the Browning X-Bolt Stainless routinely print 3/4-inch groups without fancy bedding. Recoil sits comfortably closer to a 270 than a 7mm Magnum, making those long days in the field much easier on the shoulder. Its powder efficiency is impressive. Barrel life is longer than most Magnums, and it keeps 700-yard shots achievable, especially with a duplex reticle. Elk hunters routinely drop big bulls at 450 yards, with 150 Grain Barnes TSX bullets just shy of 3,000 feet per second. But despite all this, it never really took off. Launch missteps, a renaming campaign, and the sudden popularity of the 7mm Remington Magnum overshadowed it. Hand loaders today, though, they know the truth. 60 grains of slow-burning powder behind a bonded 150-grain bullet gives you a no-dial, do-anything cartridge. White tails at 80 yards, antelope at 400. Just aim, press, and watch the results. The 280 Remington is the perfect blend of reach, manageable recoil, and raw field performance. And every time a Nosler Model 48 tears apart a cloverleaf group, that underdog label feels more like a tragic marketing failure than reality. The underappreciated classics are quietly proving themselves, and they're far from done. Moving on to number 5, the .264 Winchester Magnum. Winchester dropped this hot rod in 1959 with bold claims. A 140-grain Spitzer bullet from a 26-inch Model 70 Westerner barrel screaming at 3,200 feet per second. Long-range shooters salivated. But early chrome moly barrels didn't handle the heat well, and the chatter about throat erosion scared plenty off before modern facts could catch up. Today, stainless cut-rifled barrels or hammer-forged 5R designs chew through these velocities like it's nothing. Push a 140-grain Berger VLD at 3,240 feet per second, and you can hold tight groups at 1,000 yards with less wind drift than most new short Magnums. Drop to a 120-grain Barnes TTSX at 3,300 feet per second, and mule deer across wide-open canyons become easy targets. Rebarreled Ruger Hawkeyes or custom bolts on Defiance actions print 3/8 minute of angle routinely. That beltless case feeds flawlessly, burns powder with textbook efficiency, and recoil lands neatly above a 6.5 Creedmoor, while staying well below a 7mm Magnum. From 50 to nearly 400 yards, you often only need a single holdover point. That simplicity isn't just convenient, it builds confidence. Barrel wear. Modern shooters can extract over 1,200 rounds of match-grade accuracy before noticing decline. That's a lifetime for most hunters. Guides in Wyoming will tell you, when a 130-grain AccuBond punches through both lungs of a bull elk at over 500 yards, you stop worrying about marketing hype. Number 4, the 6mm Remington, formerly the .244 Remington. Rolled out in 1955 to outgun the .243 Winchester, but a slow one in 12 twist rate doomed its early reputation. Heavier bullets wouldn't stabilize, and people labeled it a varmint round. By 1963, the twist was corrected to 1 in 9, rechristened as the 6mm Remington, but the stigma stuck. That's a shame, because performance? Rock solid. A 100-grain soft point cruises at 3,100 feet per second, anchoring coyotes cleanly out to 500 yards. Handload a 105-grain Hornady AAX at the same speed, and with a ballistic coefficient around 500, that trajectory flattens like a laser. Extended magazine custom rifles with 24-inch barrels push 85-grain partitions past 3,400 feet per second, leaving varmint fields decimated with deadly precision. Properly bedded Model 700 varmints or rebarreled Ruger 70s regularly group under half a minute of angle. Recoil is lighter than a .243 Winchester, yet energy downrange surpasses it, letting you follow up faster and shoot with confidence. One rifle, multiple rolls, prairie dogs in the morning, whitetails in the evening. Then we get to number 3, the .303 British. Post-war Commonwealth soldiers brought their Lee Enfields into the backcountry, bridging surplus military rifles to hunting stalwarts. Modified number 4 rifles and SMLEs running 150-grain soft points at roughly 2,690 feet per second, or heavier 174-grain rounds around 2,460, proved surprisingly accurate. Inch-and-a-half groups weren't unusual. The recoil isn't a Magnum's sharp snap, it's a steady push, coaxing shooters to stay on the trigger longer, producing tighter groups on paper and in the field. Load a 174-grain soft point, and you're flirting with 308 Winchester energy out to 150 yards. The lighter 150-grain load shoots flatter than expected, and modern handloaders using Varget powders and contemporary brass can still squeeze 1-inch groups from old Parker Hale or BSA sporters. Black bear hunters in Canada still swear by a 180-grain spear hot core at 2,450 feet per second. Deep penetration without meat damage. Its rimmed case and oversized chamber keep pressures conservative. Inside 250 yards, the difference with a modern .308 is academic. Iron-sighted Enfields continue to harvest moose in Newfoundland each November. Quiet muzzle blast, soft follow-up shots, and consistent 1 to 1.25 minute of angle accuracy. That's the .303 British legacy. These rounds aren't flash, they're substance. They don't brag on the counter or the internet. They prove themselves silently in the hands of hunters who understand that consistent hits matter more than hype. Now we break into the top two, the rounds that built reputations long before marketing departments existed. These aren't niche, and they aren't forgotten. They're simply overshadowed by the new hotness, even though their track records are longer than most shooters' lifetimes. Number 2. The 757 Mauser, introduced in 1892, proven everywhere from Europe to Africa. If you've ever read classic hunting literature, you've met this cartridge. It earned its stripes the hard way, in real hunts, under real pressure, and it's still one of the most perfectly balanced medium game rounds ever designed. Run a 140 grain soft point at around 2,800 feet per second, and you get mild recoil with exceptional sectional density. On paper, it looks modest. In the field, it punches like something far bigger. 175 grain round noses at roughly 2,470 feet per second penetrate in a straight line through bone, gristle, and heavy muscle. That's why legendary hunters like Bell used it on elephants, with solids of course, and why modern guides still trust it for elk, kudu, red stag, and anything else that requires controlled expansion and deep, reliable travel. Modern Model 70 featherweights, CZ 550s, or custom Mauser actions with fresh barrels routinely shoot sub-minute groups. Handloaders pushing a 140 grain Barnes TSX at 2,810 feet per second get both speed and penetration. At real-world hunting ranges, say 200 to 350 yards, the 7X57 offers a blend of trajectory, retained energy, and shootability that simply feels right. It's not flashy, it's just effective. Always has been. The 3040 Krag. This is the cartridge most shooters shrug off without ever trying. Adopted by the US military in 1892, dismissed only a few years later, and overshadowed forever by the 3006. But here's the truth. The 3040 Krag is gentle, accurate, and devastatingly consistent. It earns the #1 spot because of what it gives the shooter, not what it gives the brochure. Factory loads push a 180 grain round nose at about 2,430 feet per second. Handloaders can safely push 180 grain soft points to around 2,600 using modern powders. Still mild, still controlled, still easy on brass. The Krag's long, tapered case and slow pressure curve make it one of the smoothest feeding cartridges ever created. In a well-cared-for Krag Jurgensen, it feels like the bolt is running on oiled glass. Number 1. The 8X57 Mauser, or 7.92 57mm. Germany's main battle cartridge through 2 world wars, yes, but let's strip away the militaria mystique. In the field, it's a powerhouse with surprisingly manageable recoil. A standard 198 grain Spitzer, cruising at over 2,600 feet per second, delivers nearly 3,000 foot-pounds of energy. That's enough to drop a mature elk, a feral hog, or a moose shoulder with authority. And it does so with a smooth, predictable push that lets the shooter stay on target and maintain follow-up precision. The recoil is often exaggerated. A full-size K98 service rifle produces less of a sharp snap than many modern Magnums. And accuracy. Once you control barrel float, throat length, and bedding, even old military surplus rifles or modern sporters like CZ 550s stack 5 rounds inside 1 minute of angle. For handloaders, it's a playground. Light 150 grain Nosler ballistic tips pushed past 2,900 feet per second zero flat to 250 yards. That's flat shooting, confidence-inspiring, and lethal on medium game. But the magic happens in timber and thick cover. Heavy bullets tear through moose shoulders or tough hog gristle without drama, retaining energy to keep the trajectory usable well past 300 yards. Overseas, European hunters still swear by Yugo M48s and Berno VZ24s, navigating thick brush and fast-paced driven hunts with the same faith soldiers once had in this round. In the US, The 8x57 faded in the shadow of the 30-06, but put a new barrel on a K98, mount quality optics, and you've got a 600-yard steel rifle holding its own with modern gear. That's the kind of performance that earns respect. Generation after generation. Smart case geometry, moderate pressure, and decades of proven rifle platforms create a combination that outperforms flashy marketing every time. What all these cartridges share, from the 257 Roberts to the 857 Mauser, is a simple, brutal truth. Performance never lies. Recoil management, efficiency, reliable expansion, and consistency under real-world conditions matter far more than novelty. These rounds have quietly powered hunts across continents, taken animals large and small, and delivered predictable results. Yet they sit on back shelves while shiny new rounds get all the attention. The 264 Winchester Magnum, the 280 Remington, the 303 British, all of them legends in their own right, whispering proof that the latest isn't always the best.